Tokyo, late November 1988. The city lay like a great beast, asleep under frozen stone. Silent, heavy, exhaling cold, dry breaths. Each morning I pulled back the curtains and looked down at the street blurred with mist, and it felt like staring at a photograph forgotten too long in the freezer. The neon signs along the shop fronts were still lit, but their glow was as pale as a dead man's skin. The editor tossed me a slip of paper without looking up. Missing schoolgirl. Might be a hot lead. Go investigate. That was all. No name, no address, no background. Yet something in his lazy voice made me hesitate to treat it lightly. I folded the paper and slipped it into my coat pocket. Maybe it was instinct, that vague instinct that rings like a bell in a reporter's head when standing on the edge of an abyss. Her name was Junko Furuta. I had never known her, but from the moment I read that name, something inside me began to quietly fracture. Yashio High School stood on the outskirts of the city, pressed close out of a narrow canal. Gray stone steps speckled with moss, rusted iron fences, wilted yellow ginkgo leaves forming a ragged carpet along the path. The air was thick with damp, as if the concrete walls had been soaking up sorrow for years. In the courtyard, a few groups of schoolgirls clustered together. As I walked past, their laughter died out instantly, as if someone had squeezed the throat of the air itself. I showed my press badge, voice low. I need to ask about someone, Junko Furuta. Black eyes glanced at each other in confusion, then slid away. A small girl with twin braids bit her lip. She disappeared. Since last Friday. She hasn't come to class. No one knows where she went. Her words fell onto the concrete like a drop of dried blood. I took notes, but my hands were icy cold. Her homeroom teacher received me in a dim staff room. The bluish-white fluorescent light etched every tired line on his face. He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the cup of hot tea he hadn't touched. Junko is a model student, he said. Always punctual, good grades, polite, never dated anyone. She had no reason to run away. I glanced at the class photos taped to the wall behind him. Dozens of girls laughing brightly under spring sunlight. But I saw only one face. Straight black hair, lips gently closed, and eyes that shone strangely, as if hiding a secret in her chest. Junko Furuta. That name left a hairline crack inside my mind. I followed her classmates' names from the list. One afternoon, I sat with 3 schoolgirls at a ramen shop near the school. Steam rose from our bowls, forming a thin curtain of mist between us. They said Junko was quiet, reserved, but often smiled faintly. She always brought homemade lunches, liked listening to pop music, and usually biked to the video rental shop after school to work part-time. She was dreamy, one whispered, but not close to many people. Did anyone see her on Friday night? I asked. They exchanged looks. Finally one answered, we only heard. Someone saw her talking to a boy from another class, but no one knows who. A shard of information. Fragile as breath. I wrote it down, imagining Junko standing under a withered yellow street lamp, smiling gently at someone, and then vanishing, dissolving into mist. The Furuta house stood in a small alley near the canal. A glass wind chime hung by the door, motionless in the cold wind, as if the whole space were holding its breath. Her father opened the door. His eyes were sunken, rimmed red, his face gaunt beyond his years. Her mother sat on the tatami, clutching a crumpled handkerchief nearly torn from being clenched so hard. She went to her part-time job and never came back, her father rasped, voice like a whetstone. The police are searching. Only her bicycle was found, abandoned by the canal. I asked to see Junko's room. It was small and neat. A desk full of books, shelves stuffed with manga, floral curtains stirring gently in the wind. On the desk was a photo. Junko in her school uniform, smiling brightly, sunlight slanting through her hair. I stood staring for a long time, and then, for a strange moment, I felt the girl in the photo looking straight at me. An urgent gaze. Like a cry for help caught mid-air. I turned away very slowly, afraid to sever the fragile thread that seemed to connect me to her world. I wandered the neighborhood asking questions. Most people only shook their heads, but an old fish vendor woman vaguely recalled, "That night, I saw a group of boys near the alley, smoking. Maybe they know something." A group of boys. I marked it in my notebook. Shadows began to take shape in my mind. Blurred figures, quietly laughing behind white smoke. I went to the video rental shop where Junko had worked. Its shutter was pulled down, a sign taped to it, temporarily closed. A neighbor said Junko had been there until after 9 that night, then biked away, and no one saw her again, as if she had dissolved somewhere along that 10-minute stretch of road. I stopped by the local police station. A young officer with a blank face showed me the missing person report. Junko Furuta, 17 years old, female, 156 cm, black hair, school uniform, missing since 25/11, no trace. "Do you suspect abduction?" I asked. He shook his head flatly. "No evidence. Could be a runaway. We're monitoring." Runaway. I imagined Junko, diligent, obedient, quiet, no friends, no boyfriend, just deciding to run away. It sounded absurd. I left the station under a wind sharp as blades, feeling as if the whole system was sound asleep. Winter nights fall early in Tokyo. By the time I stepped out of the train station, the sky had poured down black ink. Streetlights cast my shadow long and trembling across the wet pavement. I slipped into a small bar under the bridge. 1 cup of hot sake, but my throat stayed cold. In my head, a stupid question kept echoing. What does it mean for a person to vanish? Not death. The dead at least leave a body. Vanishing is when the world suddenly behaves as if that person had never existed at all. I turned on my voice recorder and murmured into the mic. Friday. She disappeared. No message, no clues, only a cold, hollow space left behind. I didn't know why I was shaking. I returned to my apartment past midnight. The city was empty as an abandoned stage, the wind clattering through torn billboards like chains. I turned on the desk lamp. The photo I'd taken of Junko's room lay there. She smiled gently, but this time I noticed, in her eyes, there was a faint, tiny shadow, like a drop of ink dissolving in clear water. I blinked, looked again. It was gone. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe not. I heard a faint chime outside the window, but there are no wind chimes in my room. I sat awake all night, and when the first light sliced across the gray horizon, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I was no longer an outsider. I have to find Junko at any cost. 3 days after Junko disappeared, I had lost count of how many people I'd interviewed. Her face sprouted everywhere like a shadow. In class photos, in her classmates' stories, on every missing person poster freshly taped to electric poles. Those round black eyes staring at me as if asking, "Can you hear me?" I could hear her, until it drove me mad. That morning, just as I was about to give up, I received a call from an anonymous schoolgirl. Her voice trembled, halting, as if each word was dragged across thorns. I saw her, with 4 boys, near Ayase Station. That group was terrifying. I turned down the radio, pen frozen mid-air. "Do you know their names?" "I only remember one named Minato." He goes to our school, comes from a well-off family, but hangs out with thugs. Minato. I wrote the name in bold, underlined it 3 times. When I asked for more details, the line went dead. Only the cold, metallic beep remained. That afternoon I went to the neighborhood near Ayase Station, just as sunset spilled rust-colored light across the sky. Gray apartment blocks stood packed together like slabs of dead concrete, balconies cluttered with damp clothes. The air reeked of mold and cigarette smoke. A group of boys huddled at the alley entrance, smoking and laughing. But as I walked closer, their laughter snapped off like someone had flicked a switch. I held out my press badge. I'm investigating the disappearance of a schoolgirl. Has anyone seen her around here? No one answered. One boy spat on the ground, glared at me, and walked away. The others followed in silence like a pack of stray dogs fading into the dark. I stood frozen, palms slick with sweat. For an instant I thought I saw the shadow of a school uniform skirt being dragged into the narrow gap between 2 buildings. But when I blinked, there was only empty, suffocating space. I kept digging into the name Minato. School records showed Nobuharu Minato, 17 years old, same school as Junko, from a wealthy family, living in Adachi district. Adachi, far from central Tokyo, an old suburb of narrow streets and moss-stained concrete bridges. I arrived after nightfall. Wind howled across an empty lot, whistling like the cries of ghosts. The Minato house was a gray 2-story box, curtains drawn tight, a dim light licking from an upstairs window. Several pairs of men's shoes lay scattered at the porch. I stood across the street, staring for a long time. My heart pounded like I was standing before a sleeping beast. An old woman passed by. I quickly whispered, "Is there anything strange about that house?" She glanced at it, lowered her voice as if afraid of being overheard. "Always full of boys, always noisy, but these past few days, eerily quiet." Silence. Silence is the scariest thing in the world. The next day, I returned to the school. Under the stairwell, a group of students were whispering. They fell silent as I approached. I spoke stiffly. "I know about Minato, and I know Junko was with him. Will you talk, or let the police come asking?" After a long pause, a thin boy lowered his head. Someone said, "Junko was lured to Minato's house, then never came back. But we're not sure. They're really violent." I thanked them, then walked away. In my mind, the fragments began fitting together like shards of glass cutting into flesh. If Junko was truly being held inside that house, I didn't have much time left. That night I returned to Minato's house. I hid behind a tree, voice recorder on, eyes fixed on the dark windows. No sound, no light, just a crushing weight on my chest like a slab of stone. Then I heard it. A faint sound, like a rope scraping against wooden floorboards. I held my breath. A shadow appeared behind the second-floor curtain. Very small, thin, shoulders trembling, as if crying. I leapt from my hiding place, heart hammering. But when I looked up, the shadow was gone. Only the thin curtain swayed, mocking me. I stumbled back to my room near dawn, numb all over. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw a girl trapped behind that hazy curtain, her mouth gagged, her wide black eyes begging. I jumped up, turned on the light, the radio, the TV, anything with human voices, just to drown out the invisible sobbing. But the harder I tried to push it away, the clearer the image became. More real. I began dreaming of Junko. She stood barefoot and bleeding in a dark room, reaching for me. When I tried to grab her hand, my fingers passed through her like smoke. The next morning I called a friend who's a police officer and told him everything. He was silent for a long time, then said only, "Don't get too deep. What you're digging into isn't clean. I laughed dryly and hung up, because I knew it was too late to turn back. Junko is somewhere inside that house, and if I don't move fast, the only thing left will be a corpse. Tonight, I'm going back to Adachi. I will break into Minato's house, even if I have to crawl through foul ditches, even if I have to smash the window with my bare hands, because if I don't, Junko will vanish again, this time forever. I've lost count of how many times I closed the file, took a deep breath, and tried to swallow the wave of nausea rising in my throat as I read the police report's dry words. The folder's cover had yellowed with age. The pages inside smelled of mildew, some still stained with faint brown coffee rings, perhaps left by the hand of an investigator many years ago. But hidden in those pages were 44 days of hell endured by a 17-year-old girl. Junko. Her name appeared on every form, every report, like a haunting note that kept tolling without pause. But it wasn't gentle. It was like a thin needle, scraping at my ears each time I read it. Day 1, November 25th, 1988. Abduction. That was the opening line of the report. I closed my eyes, letting the words seep slowly into my mind. I pictured it, an early winter evening, the pale yellow glow of street lamps stretching over wet sidewalks, Junko, clutching her navy blue school bag, hurrying home after cram school. She didn't know that the darkness was crawling right behind her, silent. The next lines: Yasushi Watanabe, 17, Hiroshi Miyano, 18, Minato, Ogura, 4 names, 4 faces staring coldly into the camera in their police mugshots. There was no hint of remorse in their eyes, only emptiness, lured into a narrow alley, beaten, dragged onto a motorbike, taken to the Minato family home. I read slowly, word by word, each sentence like a fine blade carving into my mind. I tried to picture Junko in that moment, but the image came blurred, like a photograph taken in heavy rain. I couldn't see her face, only her crumpled school uniform and the quiet tears clinging to her chin as she was dragged across the concrete floor. Day 3. The file said, physical and sexual torture began. I had snapped the file shut the first time I read that line, but then, as if hypnotized, I opened it again. I didn't know if it was morbid curiosity or the duty of a journalist, perhaps both. Forced to drink alcohol, beaten, burned with cigarettes, forced to undress, hung upside down from the ceiling. Starved, raped by multiple men every day. The words were cold as steel, emotionless, colorless. I imagined her curled up on the dark floor, the flickering neon light overhead blinking like a dead eye, the tiles stained with dried blood, the stench of urine, smoke, alcohol, and above all the stench of fear, the smell of life being crushed hour by hour. Somewhere in my head I heard ragged breathing, pleas for mercy, screams, but all of them were muffled in the suffocating air of that imagined room. I was stunned to realize those sounds weren't in the reports. They were only in my mind. Were they echoes from the void, or from Junko herself? Day 15. Can no longer stand. Severe knee injuries, temporary loss of vision from head trauma. I lingered on that sentence longer than any other, because I knew, at that point, Junko was still alive. Alive but no longer herself. A shattered body drifting in delirium, unaware of where she was, feeling only pain smoldering like a hidden fire through every fiber of her flesh. And they still hadn't stopped. Locked inside a freezer in winter, doused with water, windows left open to let freezing wind blow in. I could hear her teeth chattering, the broken sobs, her small body trembling uncontrollably. I dug my nails into my palms. I wanted to hurl the entire file at the wall, But I knew if I didn't write down what happened, her memory would disappear again. I couldn't let that happen. Day 30. No longer aware of surroundings, only reacts when beaten. That line nearly broke me. No longer aware. A girl who once dreamed of becoming a flight attendant, who once scribbled simple English phrases in her notebook, who once beamed in her last photo with friends, was now nothing more than a living husk, twitching only when struck. No one in this world deserves that. Day 43. Beaten with a heated metal rod. Oil poured over her and set on fire. When I reached that part, the air in the room seemed to congeal, as if the flames from those words had spilled out, burning through every breath. I smelled charred flesh. Maybe just my imagination, but it still made me gag. I wondered if Junko could even still feel the pain. Maybe she had already drifted too far from this world, her mind long gone from the ruined shell of her body. Maybe death came to her as release. Day 44. Cardiac arrest. Death confirmed at dawn. January 4th, 99. The words were printed in bold, isolated at the bottom of the page. I sat motionless for a long time. In the quiet office of the old newsroom, the only sound was the dry ticking of the clock. Outside the window, the sky was still the same dull gray as those winter days long ago. Junko was dead. She had died alone in the dark, with no one to hear her final call, and those 44 days now existed only in a few cold case files, in the long-vanished stains of dried blood. But in my mind, they are still alive, alive like a nightmare that refuses to fade, as if her spirit still stands somewhere behind me, watching me write these words, silent and drenched in tears. I closed my eyes, and for the first time, I whispered an apology in my mind. I'm sorry for coming too late. Chapter 04. The Night of Death. I sat alone in the frigid archive room of the newspaper office, the fluorescent lights crackling like a dying insect. On the desk before me lay the final file, marked with a red stamp, Death Record. It took me nearly 20 minutes just to place my hand on it. My skin felt cold as metal. The autopsy report began with dry statistics: body temperature, condition of internal organs, burns across the body, signs of severe brain trauma. But the more I read, the more the words warped. They crawled off the page like tiny insects, climbing up my arms. The victim's body was deformed, weighing approximately 37 kilograms. Nearly half of the blood was lost. Most of the hair had fallen out. Fingernails were gone. My throat tightened, not because of the numbers, but because of what they implied, that by the time she died, she no longer resembled a human being. And then, that line. Time of death, around 3 a.m., January 4th, 1989. I closed my eyes and let my mind drag me back to the room where she took her final breath. The room was as dark as an abandoned storage shed. Damp walls, cracks spreading like spider webs. A single filament bulb hung from the ceiling, its sickly yellow glow spilling across mottled concrete. Winter wind slipped through the cracks of the door, catching scraps of paper and spinning them like dead moths. She lay there, a shriveled figure curled in a filthy blanket, lips cracked and dry, eyes half closed, as if she hadn't finished falling asleep. I couldn't see her face clearly, only a faint breath rising like a thread of smoke, fading away in the cold. Water dripped from a leaking faucet. Each drop echoed so loud it drowned out the wind. Drip, drip, drip. Every drop like a ticking clock counting down her life. Then I heard it. Very faint, a whisper. I wasn't sure if it was real or just my mind inventing something to shield me from the silence. "Mom." I snapped my eyes open. On the desk, the police's old tape recorder was running. The magnetic tape hissed. It was the interrogation tape of the culprits, which I had taken from the archive before coming here. One of their voices emerged. Slow, dry, hollow. We poured kerosene on her, then lit it. Static crackled. I pressed my hands hard against my ears. The air around me seemed to thicken. Suddenly the smell of smoke rose, a sweet, cloying, impossible, inside this cold room, yet I could smell it. I looked around. There was no fire, but at the edges of my vision the walls darkened, blistering like burning flesh. The culprit's voice droned on, steady. She stopped screaming. She stopped moving. We thought she was already dead. I leapt to my feet, the chair crashing behind me. On the tape recorder, the reel kept spinning, and layered over their voices came another one, thin, weak, almost dissolving into air. It's so cold. I froze. I knew. That voice wasn't on the tape. I had listened to it many times in the archive with the technicians. That sound had never been there. So, why could I hear it now? I clutched my head, trying to drive it out. But the harder I tried, the clearer it became. It began whispering from everywhere, the door crack, the ceiling, from inside my own chest. I don't want to die. I'm still here. They don't see me. Do you see me? I slammed my hands on the table. The recorder fell to the ground, shattering, tape spilling out like the entrails of some torn creature. The voices stopped. Silence returned. Silence, but not peace. A silence taut as a string about to snap, full of screams swallowed whole. I sank to the floor. My hands trembled uncontrollably, and then I realized I could no longer tell which sounds were real and which were just in my head. The night she died was bleeding backward into the present, seeping into every crack of my mind. On the desk, the file still lay open, and the final line of the autopsy report stabbed into my eyes. The victim died in a state of complete isolation. Isolation. The word pounded inside my skull like a bronze bell. And suddenly I was afraid that if I closed my eyes, I would see Junko sitting silently in the corner, knees drawn to her chest, lips moving in words I couldn't hear. I didn't know if she had ever truly left that night, or if I am slowly getting trapped inside it with her. After 4 chapters of files, 44 days living in the darkness of a dead girl's memories, I believed nothing could make me tremble anymore. I was wrong. The investigation report described it as briefly as a technical manual. The perpetrators placed the body into a metal drum, poured concrete inside, sealed the lid, and left it at an abandoned construction site in Koto, Tokyo. Just one line. Only that many words to contain everything that remained of a human being. I read further into the confessions. The body had started to rot. We were afraid of getting caught. We wrapped it in a blanket, stuffed it into a 55-gallon steel drum, then poured in concrete until it was full. One of them added bluntly, "We didn't look at it anymore. Nobody wanted to look. Nobody wanted to look." That sentence stuck to my mind like tar. In my imagination, the scene appeared. 4 sullen teenage boys, faces pale, sweat matting their hair, lifting something limp, lifeless, heavy as stone. The concrete sloshing down with a thick hiss, bubbling, swallowing that small body like the maw of a giant beast. No tears, no eyes watching, only cold concrete and silence. I closed the file. My hands were icy, though the room was still. The scene report stated March 29th, 1989. Nearly 3 months after Junko's death, workers at a construction site stumbled upon an unusual metal drum, abnormally heavy, abandoned in a corner of the warehouse. The smell of rot seeped out. even though the lid had been sealed with hardened cement. We struck the drum with hammers. The concrete cracked. Human hair came out first. That was a police officer's statement. When I read that, my heart seemed to stop. Human hair. Hair. The thing that keeps growing even when the body has gone cold. I imagined the strands of black hair, wet and matted, stuck to gray concrete, dangling down like dead roots. And then, the smell. Police described it as unforgettable, unlike any dead animal. The rancid stench of human decay, a smell that clung to clothes, to hair, even to dreams long afterward. I had to go there, not because I needed more information, but because I had to face her ending, for real, not through papers, not through reports. The site, an old material warehouse, its gray walls faded, wedged among new residential buildings. The abandoned building stood like a scar nobody bothered to notice. Locals said, "No one rents that place. At night it sounds like knocking." I forced a smile and stepped inside. The air was damp, cold, moldy, like a basement that had never seen sunlight. Following the 1989 scene map, I found the exact spot, a patch of cracked concrete floor, moss creeping across it. At the center was a faint circular stain, where the concrete drum had once rested. I stood there, silent. No voices, no wind, only knock, knock, knock. I spun around. The sound was tiny, like fingernails gently tapping on hollow metal. 3 beats, then silence. I stepped back, heart pounding. My ears rang, and the tapping came again, this time from directly beneath my feet. Knock, knock, knock. I squeezed my eyes shut. There was no drum here anymore. It had been taken away 36 years ago. Nothing was here, just concrete. But if that was true, then who was knocking from inside it? I don't remember how I left that place. Only that when I got back to my room, the clock read past 3 a.m. I sat at my desk, opened my notebook. The page blurred as my eyes blinked endlessly. 4 nights without sleep. When I close my eyes, I see the concrete drum. When I open them, I still see it. I wrote between dreams and waking, letters staggering like a drunk man's steps. Junko is inside the drum. The drum is right beneath my desk. I hear knocking when I hit the keyboard. Each key I press is her pounding on the lid. She is calling me. I scratched out that line, then wrote it again, then scratched it out again. Ink bled black like blood. I am no longer sure if I am writing about a case, or if I am unlocking a sealed door to hell. A door, and behind it, the sound of knocking. I don't remember when I started typing. On the screen, hundreds of lines of text stacked atop one another like cracks in a mirror, reflecting my own face, pale, hollow-cheeked, eyes vacant and unfocused. The room was sealed shut. No calendar on the wall, no family photos, only a single piece of paper lying at the center of the desk, trembling words scrawled in pencil. Junko Furuta, 1971-1989. Every time I read it, I hear metal scraping on stone. I went to the trial. Those faces sat in the defendant's row, children wearing the shapes of men. They giggled behind their hands as the prosecutor read the indictment. One lowered his head, but his lips were still curled in a smile. Another even turned to glance at me, his eyes asking silently, "What's there to be afraid of?" I wrote. I wrote with everything left inside me, trying to carve each word like a blade into the reader's memory. But the newspaper only printed half. The other half I locked inside a wooden box, together with the only photograph of Junko I owned. Since that day, I have not slept. Tonight I sit before the final article. The sound of my typing echoes like nails sealing a coffin. Every letter is a heartbeat. Every space is a breath she no longer takes. And then, in the suffocating silence, I hear footsteps, very soft, as if someone is circling me, around and around. I don't turn around. I just keep writing, vision blurred, fingers trembling. For a fleeting moment, I see a sentence appear on the screen without my hands touching the keys. I'm still here. The article ends. I save it, then shut off the screen. The room sinks into thick darkness. I open the wooden box, take out Junko's photograph one last time. The girl in it is smiling, a gentle, innocent smile, as if she never knew the darkness of this world. I place the photo on my chest and lie down on the floor. Outside the window, dawn is rising, the sky smeared with a pale silver gray, the color of cement, of concrete, of forgetting. I close my eyes, and in that moment, I understand. There is no justice, only memory, and memory will kill me.